Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us here in the studio. Thanks for joining us out there in the world of the web. And mostly, thank you, Lol Tolhurst, for being with us today.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm all right. It's actual release day for the book. This is actual launch day. You made
publication.
Made it to the starting line. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Has it felt like a long time coming? I mean, these are a long process, getting these things done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like when you used to make albums, proper vinyl
kind of remember,
albums, right? Yeah. That, you finish it and then, about a year later it comes out. Same thing for the book. I finished the book at Christmas, so, yeah.
They've got to go send them off and print them and do all the things they do.
Right.
Set it up. So why was it time to write the book? Why was this, the moment to dig in and explore all this stuff?
I think more than anything, it's because, I'm a little older now. It's probably in the second half, we might say. You've got some perspective on how things went and how things were. I don't think I could have written it when I was in my 30s or even in my 40s, because you don't see events quite so clearly.
And where did you, given that you enter into it at this time and there's as much history as there is, as much life as there is, where do you start? What did you start with? Did you start with band stories? Did you start with growing up stories? What got this thing in motion for you?
Well, actually, the harder thing, I think, was the other question: where do you end? Because that's like, this is still ongoing. 40 years really of my life. So I don't know. Initially, I just thought I would do what you're supposed to do. Go to a cabin in the woods and start writing. And that was okay for a couple of days. And it got pretty scary. I started thinking about bears and stuff, and I had to leave and go back to Los Angeles where I live. So, but no, you just sit down and write, and you keep writing. And then you write some more, and eventually you have a book. Yeah.
So what did it, what do you feel you learned in this process? I mean, how did this make you connect the dots in a different way than you maybe otherwise would have seen or otherwise would have looked back and thought about all this?
I think for me, the hardest thing was to remember stuff, because I didn't keep a journal back then or a diary, because back then I was an existentialist, and I was going to live in the moment and not take any photographs, just live for today, not for the, which seemed pretty good at the time, but it's kind of stupid, really. But memories are funny things. So once you start thinking about everything, they're like dominoes. They start knocking onto each other, and you start to remember everything. And that was really the process that I had to undertake.
One thing that's that's really striking in the book is your account of the the neighborhood, the region you grew up,
right,
and giving a sense of a sense of time and place, a sense of England in the 70s and right, all that meant. Talk a bit about how you look back at that, what it was that you were trying to present in the book in terms of that part of the story.
I think the hardest thing not the hardest thing, but one thing that people find difficult to understand, especially people who don't really know that much about the Cure, they find it hard to understand how we had an appeal worldwide. And by explaining to everybody exactly where we came from, how it started, I hope to illuminate that a little bit, because we grew up in a small town on the edge of the capital. We were outsiders in our own town, and we had to kind of struggle to get going. And I think that's something that speaks to a lot of people. I mean, I know it speaks to a lot of people in America, that grow up in little small towns dotted across the continent. And so by describing that, and it was also a time of kind of austerity, because there was still all that sort of fallout from the Second World War. It didn't start to change in England really until the 80s, you know. And so there's some parallels there with other places. And I can remember coming to New York in the 80s, and it wasn't the nice, lovely place it is now. It was a little more gritty and stuff. So, you know, I wanted, by explaining where we came from, to show how we connected with people, you know.
Well, and to follow that, I mean, what do you feel then came out in the music, came out in the songs, that was reflecting that was connected to that? I mean, how did the time and place actually impact what the work was?
Well, as I was saying, I think we felt like we were outside of the mainstream. You know, when we grew up, the predominant musical force was either really sort of overblown prog rock or disco. None of which, you know, really, you know, spoke to us as you know, three guys from, you know, the suburbs. So I think where we grew up was like, you know, it was a little darker, a little more uncertain, and so that got put in the music, you know.
And then, you know, also talking about being, if not on the front lines, but being there for the punk explosion
That
in
was
England
the
at
thing
the
that gave
time.
it, yeah.
So, you know, and it's always fascinating to hear sort of real time. I mean, there's so much mythology that's grown up around all of that, but it put us in that, you know, what it felt like.
That's what gave us the permission to do what we did, because until that time, you know, musicians and music seemed highly elevated and away from our own experience. We didn't really have any connection to it in that way. And punk came along, and you know, basically Joe Strummer gave us permission to do what we had to do, and we understood. You know, oh yeah, okay, they can do that, we can do it. So that's really what happened for us with the punk thing. Yeah.
It's become so legendary, and it's become this moment. When you're in the middle of it, did it feel like this is the world changing? Do you have that? You said you have the perspective now for these stories. When there's something like that happening, are you aware of how significant it is?
I don't know if you're particularly aware, but I know that we felt that it was exciting, that something was changing. I know we felt that because that was something that happened on a weekly basis. You know, a weekly basis there was like a new single out by, you know, another band, and it was all exciting every time. And you know, there were lots of things that we went to that were, you know, like pivotal moments. Like on the back cover of the first Clash album, there's that picture of some big Notting Hill riot. Well, we were there. I was there when that went down. I was like 17, you know, and it was like, wow, something's happening, you know. We knew that.
So let's talk a bit about the relationship with the history and the relationship with Robert Smith, which goes back to, you're both 5 years old. You're 5 years old, right?
Yeah.
Not that you can recall necessarily the first meeting and the 5-year-old meeting, but you know, it's something that plays out in the book a lot. When did you have a sense that there was something, you know, that there was something special about him, and that there was something that was special about this, you know, about the relationship that was developing with you guys?
Yeah, I think really it's that point when you're changing, you know, from being kids into being adults, you know, the teenage years, and there's something about that time that you share with people that you go through that with that's very special. They know you in a way that nobody else is ever going to know you in your life. And at that point, for Robert and I, we were like in middle school, 11 till 13. That's when really the genesis of what became The Cure started, and that's when we discovered, you know, that each other, that we really both really like music, and we wanted to do something with it, you know. Because I can remember going into the school library, and Robert came up to me and said, "Oh, you like Jimi Hendrix?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? I have a big poster of him on my bedroom wall." He's going, me too," and we just sort of started from that, you know, and we started sort of discovering, okay, his older brother had some records, my older brother, and we just sort of, you know, kind of sort of, understand from that, listen to some of the old stuff and get an idea of what we could do. And that was, teenage,
One thing obviously so remarkable about The Cure is there are, there are not that many bands that actually create something that's new.
Right.
Something that sounds genuinely different, feels
Right.
genuinely different. Tell me about finding that, early on, starting to find something that was a distinctive voice, perspective, idea. You go through, you're imitating stuff, you're listening to Jimi Hendrix record, you're taking in these influences. How did that start to refine into something that was your own?
Yeah. Well, there's actually, I thought a lot about this, and there's a point where we flip things over the other way. Because a lot of bands, you're right, when you start, the first thing you do is you go, okay, what do we like? And you start to try and play music like the people that you like. So we did a little bit of that, and then we decided, no, we're going to change it all the way around the opposite side, flip it over. Like, we're not going to play anything we don't like. We're just going to take, okay, well, we don't like big, long drum fills, no, we're going to take those out. We don't like big, long guitar solos, we're going to take those out. We don't like this, we're going to take this. And what we were left with is what we played, and then we developed it from there. So that's really the attitude that we took. It was not so much what we liked, but what we didn't like, we left out instead.
And so sort of carved it down.
Yeah, the other way around.
Yeah. For you, what was the... I don't know, was there a moment where you felt like, now we've arrived somewhere? I mean, just creatively, leaving aside the success or the sales or whatever, was there a moment where you felt like we're on to something?
Yeah, there was a few of those moments, but one that comes to mind was, I think probably in the very early 80s, just as MTV started, and we were in Los Angeles, and we did an appearance at a club. And up until that time, our audience had been predominantly serious young men. Maybe they dragged their girlfriend along now and again, but mostly it was male. And I can remember walking out onto the stage in this club in Los Angeles. I can't remember where exactly it was now. And all of a sudden it was like Beatlemania. There was screaming girls everywhere. And I looked over to Robert, he's sitting about as far away as I am from you, and I was like, what is this? What happened, And it was just like we'd been on MTV a couple of times, and suddenly, the whole thing had just shot up. So, yeah, that's one point I thought, oh, something's different here.
The 80s, it was MTV. It was this time of massive industry growth. I mean, everything was exploding. Everything was just going bigger and bigger and bigger. Right. And for you guys, it was, pretty rapidly growing bigger and bigger through those first albums. Yeah. What was the emotional ride of suddenly watching everything mushrooming like that for the band?
It was very intense, obviously. And I mean, I realized through writing the book that in the first years we played shows like nearly every other day. At one point, I think we did 1,000 shows in 3 years. So that's fine, and it's okay, but you need to have some kind of stamina to keep up with that. And it took a toll in the end. There had to be something that would break. So
in 1989, you and The Cure go your separate ways.
Right.
But it seems like at this point you look at that almost as rescue.
It was more of a rescue than a parting of ways. And in fact, the way I looked at The Cure, and I've always looked at The Cure, is it's family. It's not a job. It's not something that did 9 to 5. It's my family. When I meet Robert now, first thing we ever talk about is family, because I know all of his family, knows all of mine. We don't talk about music, we don't talk about the business or whatever we have to do, we talk about family. And so that was kind of painful for me to have that divorce, as it were, at the time. But it was also necessary, very necessary.
I mean, did you just, would continuing down that road just have ended up in disaster one way or another for you, for the band?
Yeah, it would have ended in tears completely, yeah, and probably not just mine, So.
And similarly, you write extensively then about pursuing the lawsuit
Right.
against the band, pushing for a bigger piece of the pie of the Cure, ultimately not winning the suit. And I think again at this point feeling that there's actually a lot of good that came out of that.
Well, yeah, because you never really know what you've got until you don't have it anymore, And the thing about the Cure was, and still is, it's more about the friendship. It's more about the bond between people. That's the important part. Everything else is peripheral to it. Everything else comes and goes as it will. And so I had to get out of the eye of the storm to be better and to feel better and to actually resolve everything in the end.
I mean, it's almost a punchline with the Cure. The sort of continually revolving door over the years as members come in and out. I mean, I remember doing a chart at one point when I was still at Spin that looked like this crazy graph of multicolors and arrows and circles and all this.
Right.
I mean, what do you think that it is? Is there such a sort of pure vision in Robert's head that it's hard for anybody to stay on that ride for long? What do you think that is?
I don't know that it's so much that. I think because, even though it seems like there's been a whole bunch of people in, not really. There's about 13 characters that kind of float in and out all the time. And a lot of people have been back 2-3 times, right? It's more to do with the fact of him wanting to challenge himself a lot of the time, I think when things get too comfortable for Robert, then he'll want to flip it over. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not, but it's what has happened. At the moment, I think it's very good and very comfortable the way it's going on, so it's fine.
And what do you think is what's the biggest misconception, misunderstanding, especially about Robert? I mean, about the band, but especially, after all these years, as people look at him, what do they not see?
I think that probably the biggest misconception is that we're not, and Robert has never been this po-faced goth sitting in a room with candles and crying. That's not the person. My wife Cindy, the first time she ever met Robert, said to me, "Oh my goodness, he's so witty and humorous, and he's really a funny guy." And I said, "Yeah, that's the person I know, So I think it's because we always took what we did seriously, didn't necessarily take ourselves that seriously. You start to believe your own myth too much, and that's a very dangerous place to be.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, honestly, it took me a while. I had a sort of a natural resistance against the Cure for
Right.
the sort of everything around it, and then something clicked, and I don't even remember, but one song, and I thought, oh, but it's funny.
Right.
Like I hadn't seen that at all, and all of a sudden the whole thing sort of opened up in a very different way.
Well, thank goodness for that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah. No, but there was some hurdle to clear
Right.
there, and then it
Right.
took on a whole other feeling.
Right, and I think that's been true of a certain parts of the musical establishment for sure. Yeah.
So you feel like, I know several years back you did get up and do some shows with the band and play
Right.
those records.
Right.
You feel like, externally and internally, that you use the word resolution. You feel like you're in a steady place with this part of your life as of right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way I view my life now is anything's possible. A few years back, nothing was possible. But at the moment, anything is possible, and that's a wonderful place to be. It really is. Yeah, I mean, we did those shows together. We did some shows in New York. It was transcendent. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful thing to do.
And the last thing I'll ask, and then we'll go to questions from you guys. As you've been out promoting the book and going into bookstores, and one thing we know is that Cure fans are very intense.
Yes.
They are not fooling around.
No.
What have you seen? What have you learned at this point interacting with fans and dealing with them? Is there something else that you see, through their lens at this point?
You know what? I've been doing a little bit of promotion, like you said already, and I'm both humbled and flattered by the people that come up, because it's really a wonderful thing to have made such a difference for people in people's lives, and I feel very grateful for that. I feel blessed to be in that position. I've met people so far from 60 to 16, so it just proves to me that the music, and the idea, it's not even so much the music, it's the idea of the Cure resonates still with people, generation after generation, which is great.
All right. Well, let's hear some questions from you guys. Somebody down front.
Hey, Lal. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
My mom actually introduced me to you and the band's music, so it's been with me for a while, since high school.
Right.
So I just want to ask you, how has the music industry changed, like, for you? Like, I know that the punk rock scene kind of changed over the years and kind of branched out into different genres. So I just want to know what your intake on that is.
Well, the music industry has changed absolutely completely because, of the internet and everything that came along with that. I think it's a lot harder now for people to do what we did. When I first started, we were able to come and play in America, and maybe there were, a few hundred bands that did the same thing going around, and you could make a life out of just doing that, playing in colleges, playing in smalls. I don't think that's possible anymore. I think it's a lot harder now to be a musician and make a musical life. So I'm very grateful that we came along at the time we did,
And you're watching that. You're watching your son
Oh,
deal
yeah.
with it now, right?
Yeah, I'm watching my son. My son's 24, and he's got his own band and stuff, and they're kind of doing okay, but it's harder for them for sure. Yeah.
Hi, Lal. I'm a big fan of you, and I read the book. It's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
I have a serious question, and if there's time, a not so serious question. But the serious question is, you talk in the book how part of the reason why you live in California now was because when you first visited in July 1981 with Robert and Simon, you just sort of fell in love with the people, the places, and the weather.
Right.
But sort of a traumatic event happened just before July 1981 with your mother passing away.
Right.
So I'm wondering how you were in the state of mind to sort of deem anything wonderful at that point.
Well, I think, and it's a very good question, I think that a lot of times, and you'll probably realize this from the book, when dramatic events happened in my life, I tended to run away, right? So it was another point to run away, but it had a happy ending. Do you see that? It's like, because it's a traumatic event, I had to have a dramatic reaction to it. And so I think that's really the answer more than anything else, that, out of extreme pain, eventually I would find happiness, I think that's the yin and yang of life. It's not, you can't plan to be happy. Just what happens is, okay, if life gets too bad or too sad or too hard, eventually something has to give, and you're going to rise up against that, and that's really what that was, I think.
And
Does that answer it?
And from there to a silly question, if it's quick.
Okay.
Yeah, great answer. You have an ex-girlfriend in the book. I think your first, Sarah,
Right.
who you, I believe, visited a pillbox with at one point.
Yeah.
And she labeled you around town as a, quote, hard man.
Right.
Where supposedly Simon would cross the street if he
Right.
saw you.
Yeah.
I don't grasp the concept of what a hard man is.
Okay, I used to get in a lot of fights. Does that make it? And people would think that I was tough. I wasn't really, but I had a good image, so it looked good. And she would tell Simon that just to sort of, make herself go up in the hierarchy of high school, I think, really. And by the way, Sarah's not a real name, but it's okay. Yeah.
But the fights are real. But the
Yeah,
hardness
the fights
is
were
real.
real. Yeah. But me and Simon always laugh about that because it was so ridiculous, really. Yeah.
Thank you.
We can do one more right here.
Hi, Lowell. Every time I've come across you in LA, you've been very nice to meet, and it's nice to hear about how you've got this resolution now. I'm happy to hear that. Hearing about how you're talking about family, it's been cool seeing all the stuff you guys have shared online. You reunited with, like, Boris and people getting
Right.
together, and you shared that your son's working in music. as a parent, with what you've experienced in the industry, have you been very enthusiastic? Yeah, go for it, full bore. Or as a parent, have you been kind of saying, okay, it's cool, music's good, but have you been guiding him, saying, have something to fall back on, or study something?
Okay, I think I can explain that to you when I tell you that at Christmas, he will finish school with his 3rd degree. So I'm like, yeah, the music business, yeah, get something first to do before you go to. I mean, I couldn't dissuade him from going into it, but I could at least go, okay, well, have something else that, just in case. Yeah.
The book is Cured. It is out today. Thank you all for joining us. Congratulations on publication.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lol Tolhurst.
Thank you.